But next, to the latest in the fallout from the FIFA president Gianni Infantino's abandoned plan to sell off stakes in the World Cup. Despite his backing down and apologies from some FIFA leaders, the European Football Confederation, UEFA, is maintaining its threat to boycott future competitions, and they say they've lost confidence in Infantino as a leader. South America's Football Confederation also expressed their concern over his leadership, and it all comes as Infantino is up for re-election next March. Well, for more, I'm joined here on set by sports journalist Thando Sibiya. Thando, welcome. It's nice to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Can you first just explain why this controversy hasn't gone away? I mean, Infantino has walked back his plans, so why hasn't UEFA walked back their boycott?
I think the timing of this is impeccable, just before the elections. So what we're starting to see is that there must have been something brewing way before the World Cup, and perhaps the World Cup was the final nail in the coffin, especially in relation to Gianni Infantino's presidency. Because you look at the steps that have been taken and the things that have been happening after the announced FFE, which is the FIFA Forward Entity, and with the 20% stake sell-off, which would basically be a permanent stake being sold of FIFA, which is practically selling football, because in the history, 120 plus years of FIFA's existence, there has never been external ownership of the federation or the organization. So it brings a lot of question marks to his interest, his credibility. But I really want to draw the viewers' attention to the happenings that have happened, because on the 31st of July, after Gianni Infantino announces that he would like to propose this FFE, Carlos Cordero, which was his senior advisor since 2023, if I'm not mistaken, resigns. And so you look at his CV, who is a former banker at Goldman Sachs in the United States. He's a former Soccer Federation vice president as well. So you get to see that this is the person he had in his environment, and his role was basically to advise new strategic initiatives to grow the game at all levels. And basically, we start asking ourselves, if this is the kind of person who resigns after that kind of proposal, it's beginning to look kind of like a sabotage. I'm not saying that it's a final thing, but I do see that from internally, the happenings that have been happening, because straight after that, you have UEFA, which is the strongest confederation financially in terms of influence. If you look at even the history, that's basically the forming confederation of FIFA, because 7 of the many 55 states or member associations in UEFA were the founding fathers of FIFA. And so they basically are showing that we carry a lot of weight. And so when they threaten to boycott the World Cup, and then Gianni reverses on his decision, it shows that they carry a lot of weight. So Alison Sargent, who is the current president of UEFA, did express displeasure during the World Cup, even prior, about certain decisions that were made from Gianni Infantino. One, which was an explicit decision, was the denial of a visa for Somali referee into the United States. That was the beginning of the controversy of, okay, as FIFA, how do you respond to this? Because FIFA protects the rights and interests of referees. Meanwhile, that is a state decision that was taken by the United States because of their laws. And so we did start to see a clash. And in response to that, which you see that there's a lot of soft and hard power that is at play here by the different actors. So when I speak of Seferan, his stance was immediately to offer the Somali referee a position to then referee in one of the upcoming tournaments that will be coming up on the calendar, a UEFA tournament. And so that basically then shows that, okay, you have taken the stance, Gianni Infantino, to not protect the interests of this referee. Myself, as the UEFA president, will then support him in a certain way in terms of governance, in terms of the credibility of federations. It then leans more towards Seferan and UEFA, because then that protects the interest of football. And that is the interplay that's happening right now, because if you have a president who's willing to sell the game, who is not protecting the interest of football, that then gives the opposition the way more reason to not back you. And since then UEFA has put their stance of not backing Gianni Infantino, but their boycott is mainly of the World Cup. There hasn't been any official statement that they are not supporting Gianni Infantino's next campaign, which is next year in March. However, the Welsh and the Swedish federations, football federations, have now explicitly come out and said that we are not supporting Gianni Infantino in the upcoming run, which is something that is not very common. And so it starts begging the question, what is at play here behind the scenes at FIFA and the other federations?
Oh, I want to ask just about the federations that continue to support Infantino, like the African Federation.
Yeah.
Where's their stance coming from?
I think it's very interesting because we speak a lot about defending football. But I think it's whose interest in football. UEFA and CAF have been at loggerheads in the past several years because of the calendars, the release of players, interests that are not perhaps aligning all the way. As far as development is concerned, I do think that when you have the likes of, his name is evading me now, Arsene Wenger, who is basically the head of development, they've brought in somebody who understands that you need the African continent if you're going to be developing any type of European football. You look at the statistics, you look at how many players are going through the channels from Africa into European footballs and then bring about so much revenue, which has become a business model for clubs, for national federations, because then the way that most of these federations and clubs are getting money is through the sale of players. And so the most players, and even if you look at demographics and statistics, Africa in the next coming 20 years has about 75% of the youth population. And so if you are looking at the future of football or any interest, you have to look at the interests of African football. So in the previous years, Gianni Infantino has been very supportive of African football. There's been a lot of strides that have been taken to the improvement of African football. So it only makes sense that President of the CAF, which is the African Football Federation, Patrice Motsepe, would be supporting Gianni Infantino. So you look at how he supported the expansion of the AFCON, the revenue that was put into the African football, investment, even just shifting global attention to African football. You look at how, in terms of commerce or commercial interests, African football saw an incline. The African Cup of Nations in 2023 versus the most recent one, which was last year. From a commercial perspective, they had a greater reaching the United States. ESPN bought some rights to that. And so you do get to see that FIFA has the eye on the commercial side of things, which is bringing a lot of revenue. And in order to get revenue, it helps with development. UEFA, however, they don't need development. They don't need that much revenue. They are advancing a different plan. And so now what we're seeing is these two federations at loggerheads.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Thando, we're going to have to leave it there. It's very interesting. It's going to be so interesting to see what happens next with Infantino. That was sports journalist Thando Sibiya speaking to us there.